Hello, everybody. Look at that. It is exactly 5 p.m. I don't think I've ever started a panel exactly on time before. Welcome to this. This is the third of the CMU panels that we are presenting as part of Independent Venue Week this week. Hopefully some of you have been tuning in to our panels yesterday and the day before. In some ways, they're covering similar topics, but also quite different topics. So this is... Oh, I think I'm going to ask my panelists just to mute their mics because I think there's a little bit of an echo on there. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is the third of our panels, as I say, and we've got quite a wide topic for the next 60 minutes, but I'm pretty confident that we have the panelists in place to do this justice in the 60 minutes that we have. So all week at our sessions, obviously, at an event that's all about independent venues, that's an event that's all about the independent live music community, it's quite predictable what the big theme has been throughout the week, which is obviously the impact of the COVID pandemic and shutdown over the last 12 months on the live industry. But as our remit this week with our panels has been, first of all, to review where we're at and to review the impact that COVID has had on the business, on the community, but also to look to the future and to try and find some positives, whether or not that is positive things that we can be doing as a community today to mitigate the ongoing negative impact of the pandemic and to ensure that a healthy live industry can return once it is all over. And also looking at, are there some things changing behind the scenes, or could there be, as the industry starts to revive, that will mean that we can get a better live music industry at the other end of this than perhaps we had in 2019 before it all began. So that's kind of the remit of today. It's the future of the live sector, both in the next year as we continue to deal with COVID and beyond. But before we delve into the topic, let's get all the introductions done. I've not even introduced myself, so I should do that. My name is Chris Cook. I'm the founder and managing director of CMU. We are a London-based company that help people to navigate and understand the music business, and we do that in a number of different ways. So we have our daily email bulletin and our weekly podcast. We have a website full of resources that you can access and download. And we do lots of training and research and reports on trends in the music business. And basically what that's meant for the last 12 months is writing an awful lot about the COVID pandemic and its impact on the music business. So much, in fact, that when all the Brexit nightmares kicked off at the start of this month again, it was almost a relief to be writing about Brexit again instead of writing about COVID. So we're reporting on all of the trends and developments and debates in the business. So let's get my panelists to all quickly introduce themselves now. I'm going to try and do this in alphabetical order, depending on my alphabet abilities, but I do know that that means we're going to kick off with Adam.
Good evening. My name's Adam Hatton, and I'm Managing Director and founder of Global Motion, and we are a freight forwarder that specialises in the music industry. So we get together with tour managers, production managers, and management of bands to help plan tours. And then when they go on sale, we effect them. We move them around the world by air, sea, and road until they are completed. All customs paperwork, all shipping. That's what we do.
Fantastic. Okay, and then let's get Betsy next.
Hello, I'm Betsy. I'm from Bush Hall Music Venue in West London, Shepherd's Bush, and I am the events and music manager there.
Okay, nice and punchy and simple. Okay, let's come to Mike next.
Hello everyone, Mike Greek from Creative Artists Agency. We're a talent agency. We represent music clients and arrange their touring globally. We're in a fortunate position that we're an American company, so we represent most of our clients globally, and it's my role to basically plan, strategize, negotiate, and activate global tours for artists.
Okay, nice and simple. Okay, we'll come to Moose next.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Moose. I am the managing partner at Marauder. We act as the direct connection between our rather diverse and global list of clients with the North American market. In addition to working with a number of signed and unsigned artists and projects, we also run Independent Venue Week in the US. And it was through our work running Independent Venue Week in the States that we helped create the National Independent Venue Association, NIVA, of which I am the executive director as well. And we rolled out the Save Our Stages program that has led to a $15 billion grant through the federal government in the States.
And we'll be coming back to some of that later. But finally, let's get Rick to introduce himself. Oh, and you'll need to turn your mic on.
I love that. I'm Rick Salmon, a director at ATC, which is a management company and live agency. We represent around 60 clients on the management side of the business and about 400 from the live on the live roster. And we also started a new business called Drift at the beginning of lockdown last year, which I'm running alongside what I'm doing at ATC, which is a specialist promoter and producer of ticketed live stream events.
Fantastic. So that's our panel introduced. So I'm going to kick things off with what is the killer question and the trickiest question. And I know some of my panelists might say this is a stupid question, which basically is, okay, well, where are we at? So, I mean, the live industry in much of the world has basically been in complete shutdown since last March. I think probably most people on this panel would agree with me that had we done a panel last March when we were dealing with the initial impact of COVID, none of us would have been talking about its impact on March 2021. We were initially thinking about weeks and then months. But was anybody really expecting us a year later to be still considering the impact? But I'm just interested to get from my panelists who come from different perspectives, different countries, different markets, different roles within the music industry and the live sector in particular, is, where do you think we are at? Are we months away from getting back to something nearing normal? Or, as some people have been saying increasingly in recent weeks, are we looking at least another year of being pretty much in a significant near shutdown? So I think, as an independent venue week, I might ask Betsy's opinion first. Betsy, what obviously you're a venue that isn't able to put on shows at the moment. I mean, there was that period where you could dabble with socially distanced shows, and then we went back into full lockdown. I mean, what are you expecting in terms of being able to have restricted shows and full on filled to the roof capacity shows? Are we looking at weeks, we're looking at months, looking at years, or is it impossible to say?
I would say it's impossible to say, but we're kind of gearing towards September 2021, which is mad because last March we were gearing towards September 2020. So that's a whole nother year that we're going towards. In terms of socially distanced events, we have done a couple, but they're just not viable for us at all. We're not making the money that we should be. So we want to wait until we're able to fill out the capacity full, instead of our capacity is 420 and our socially distanced capacity is 100. So it just doesn't add up. So September 2021, fingers crossed.
Okay, so that's what you're currently working to. Yeah. I'm going to come to Mike next to sort of get an agent's perspective. I mean, I know that what the last year as an agent has involved a lot of rescheduling and rebooking shows, and it's like the March show is becoming a May show, is becoming a September show, becoming a January show. I mean, from your perspective, what are you expecting, hoping for in the year ahead?
Well, firstly, I'd like to forget the phrase contingency plan, because I spent the last nearly 12 months working on contingency plans for rescheduling concerts, as you rightly reference, and that continues to go on. I mean, to answer the question, there's twofold answer. There's global touring and there's domestic UK touring. My personal view is that in the UK, there'll be a staggered opening of venues in different sizes, probably from around the September window, which mirrors what Betsy is saying. Potentially there might be an opportunity to do outdoor concerts, socially distanced, or at least group, run so that they're slightly socially distanced, in as much pockets of 500 people or 1,000 people to a capacity of 5, 6, 7, 8,000. I can see UK artists being able to potentially look at those in August and September, and I can see a return to UK artists touring in the UK, throughout the autumn again, probably in a tiered opening up. The bigger challenge is global touring, and the majority of our clients are global touring acts, and acts who don't base themselves in the UK, and that is going to be a harder and a longer wait, I think, for touring to happen, because there's immigration issues, there's transport issues, there's freight issues, and there's different regulations for different countries. And the biggest challenge for global touring is creating a Swiss cheese version of a tour, whereby you've got 20 countries and 10 fall out, and then that makes the tour untenable. So I think global touring will return to some degree in early 2021, but some domestic touring is probably likely in 2020. However, and as a side, America, which is clearly a very dominant global market, there's lots of conversations there that they think that the outdoor business to some level will open up from July, August time. So different countries have different reads.
Well, that's interesting. You've brought the US into the equation, and as you say, I think it's important, as you have just stressed there, that there is both a country by country approach to this, but for any artist for whom touring is an international pursuit, there is, this is a global problem, and things are happening at different speeds around the world. I mean, if we come to Moose next, I mean, it sort of seems, well, since the pandemic hit here in the UK, our news coverage of the pandemic is focused exclusively on the UK and the US, and we haven't really had many reports about what's happening elsewhere in the world. But from the reports we're getting from this side of the Atlantic, it does seem like the US is a bit behind the UK in terms of things like the vaccine rollout. Obviously, it's a bigger country, a bigger population. Although it's interesting that Mike there saying that possibly getting a little bit more optimism from the US in terms of, say, outdoor shows. I mean, what are you thinking? First of all, from a US perspective, but also get your global perspective in terms of, are we talking months or are we talking at least another year?
I mean, I think that it's strange that you would consider Mike's response to be optimistic, that 6 months away we may be able to do something outdoors, when that in itself is going to be 15 months after the onset of this, right? So it's just interesting to frame it in that respect. It's not even true, but like 17, 18 months after the onset of this. I think reopening is going to depend upon three major different facets, and in no particular order. I think that those different facets are going to be, first and foremost, what's legal. What does the local government, the state government, federal government allow? And I think we'll see those changing with the new administration in some respect. I think the other aspect of that is going to be the consumer confidence. Who's comfortable paying for tickets? Obviously, you have to, figure out your staff as well in that respect. The artists performing too. So this general feeling of somebody feels safe going out. And then the third aspect of that is going to be just the science, just the actual science of, is it safe for people to be in one place? That's going to obviously dictate a lot of the other conversations. And what Dr. Fauci's been saying is that, he said at a conference a week or two ago, is that he feels the fall of 2021 is going to see the return of the live industry. But we will see. I mean, I should not speak so confidently, but I agree with Mike. There is a lot of talk of outdoor events happening over the summer. I agree with Betsy that these indoor restricted events are not profitable, and unfortunately, in the States, we have politicized the ability to consider science. So there are a lot of people that are, choosing to put what they would consider their freedom over common sense. And I think that's where businesses have to make a decision whether it makes more sense for them economically to stay shut, or whether it makes more sense for them to earn a fifth of what they would be able to operate if they were able to operate at capacity. And as we all know, the margins in this business are not big enough where your business model can continue making a fifth of your income, at least not in the live sector.
I'm going to come to Adam next. I mean, get your perspective for your business, and also, your clients and the people that you are talking to across the live industry. I mean, are you having similar expectations than what we're hearing from Betsy and Mike and from Moose?
No, we were very negative from the outset. We thought it would be a year. Turns out we weren't negative enough. That we now believe that in terms of global touring, which is all we really get involved in, apart from regional deliveries, we're looking at 2022. And we've got a couple of acts who are talking to us now about 2022. But generally for this year, business would be down 98%, something like that. No one is moving anything, just a few vendors now and again repatriate some equipment. The bellwether for us is, and for everyone, should be the tourist industry, because in order to move the volumes of freight we move around, we use wide-bodied aircraft. Those aircraft you fly on with 2 aisles rather than just the one. And as soon as passengers were restricted by kind of quarantine rules, all the airlines downsized their fleets so that they use the smaller aircraft for cost-effective reasons. And those aircraft are still on all the routes. So until hotels open, until tourists are encouraged to come to countries, that the larger aircraft won't be put on, in which case the freight we just won't be able to move it. Now, obviously, the bigger acts do use chartered aircraft. They can rent their own, and that would be possible. But it's linked to the passenger side, because if tourists aren't welcome, if hotels aren't open, it's the same deal. There's no reason to go. So yeah, pretty negative really. We're confident for March 2022. I mean, there was the UK Minister for Health came out and said that by the autumn they thought that everyone would have been offered a vaccine in this country. Well, if you then allow a 6-week period for it to bed down, you're looking at going into winter, which means that we would start quoting for moves in the spring and summer, which normally happens. It's quieter in the winter, busier in the summer. So yeah, we're very much looking at March 22 and battening down the hatches. And this time next year, I'll be either fluent in Russian or a grade 8 pianist. I'm not sure which yet, but I'll be working on it.
So, but interesting that you were, talking about at least a year from the start. I think one thing that's definitely coming out here is there is the local, domestic, national, international elements to this, and each different strand of the business, depending on what level you're operating at as an artist, a promoter, an agent, etc., has a big impact on how you will answer this question. I'm going to come to Rick. We've done a few panels since COVID began, and I think on every single one I've asked you this question. And obviously it is a moving beast. With a manager hat on, obviously you also have the agency side of the business. What is your perspective now in terms of months, or are we talking about a full year? And I guess the difference between opportunities in the UK and versus global.
Yeah, firstly, Adam, hearing you talk like that, man, and you're right at the front line of this, but we're all suffering, aren't we? Mike with huge global tours, you, Adam, with moving enormous logistics around everyone. Betsy, one of the best venues in London. It's just been bizarre, and I think we've all just got to be realistic now going forward that even if things snap back, towards the end of summer, there's going to be at least a 6-month period until, those reverberations start settling down and life returns to some sort of normality. And somehow we've just got to try and work out a way where we've all got a long-term plan. It's been devastating to us as a management company and an agency. Obviously, the live agency is completely stopped. Management company perhaps a little less badly affected, simply because, of course, artists can still make music. They can still communicate with fans. They can still, create content to a great extent. So there is still some activity going on that side, but even that comes with great challenges. A lot of the artists we work with find this environment really challenging, personally, emotionally, mental health wise, creatively, very difficult to get inspiration from your front room. You know what I mean? Most of us get inspiration from walking the streets and walking the world and bumping into strangers and everything that comes with it. So it's really tough on every single level. Obviously, I know we'll come on to this later, but we've got a small silver lining with this new business Drift, of course, because it is able to function during this time. But what I definitely don't want to be is the guy on this panel going, "Oh, happy days for Drift," because whilst lockdown is locked down, then these shows continue. That was never our intention at all with this model. But I think one small silver lining for us as a group of people in our business is that, yes, at least we've been able to activate this new revenue stream and be a part of an innovation, which has brought some positivity. but no, I mean, we pushed all our major tours back. Nick Cave's tours pushed back to 2022. Well, every tour is. We may be doing a couple of tours. We've got a Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes tour for November. Nothing really large scale of any sort before then at the moment.
So there's two channels here of this sort of that we've got both nationally and globally. We'll come to whenever it is that the restart begins. I mean, as Rick just said that, I mean, that's a really important point, isn't it? That we're not talking about an overnight restart. We're probably talking about at least a 12-month restart. And we'll talk a little bit more about quite what that would involve in a moment. But I guess if we just stay within the crisis mode for the time being, here in the UK, despite various issues with the government here has dealt with and managed the pandemic. I mean, there has been some upsides in that there has been the furlough scheme for companies with employees. There has been the scheme supporting freelancers. We all knew that there were some significant gaps in that support, which the government has done a very good job of ignoring for 9 whole months. But where you qualified for that support, then it did keep a lot of people in jobs and in business in the short term. Then we had the specific funding for the cultural sector, which was a number of venues. Well, actually many venues successfully got through the Arts Council, but a lot of that is currently scheduled to end in March and April, and we're clearly not talking about being in anywhere near close to resuming in March and April. So I might come to Betsy now first. I mean, as a venue, I mean, even if you can start doing some of the sort of shows of domestic talent in the autumn as your home, and then maybe more full on and stuff happening next year, I mean, I'm assuming that you need more support and more clarity from government and possibly the wider industry to get you through the summer.
Absolutely. So we got the Culture Recovery Fund, the first one. So we were successful in that. And then they've just released this one, the second one, which will cover you from March till June, I think. But then that's only a 3-month window. And then after that, God knows what's going to happen. We really don't know. But I think the main thing that we need to keep in mind is supporting everyone behind the scenes. So all the tech, all that, like our freelancers haven't had any work for a year, and all our bar staff are 0 hours contractors. So like they haven't had any work all year. So it's not just the venues, it's everyone that works behind the scenes that needs the support as well.
I'm going to come back to Rick now, just because I know from conversations we had earlier in the year. I mean, once those schemes like the furlough scheme, etc., came in, you did a very good job of working out exactly how you could benefit from that. But I mean, is there now concerns that we still don't, we're going to need it for more than March and April, and we're still waiting for the government to come to a conclusion as to, will we have this support for as long as we need it, or are we going to have to make some very difficult decisions at some point?
Yeah, I suppose as a company, so we've got about something like 70 staff, I think, across the business and the various offices. So I think ATC was fairly well positioned in the sense that we were a large enough scale business for the various government supports, whether it's the civil loans or the bounce back loans or the Arts Council funding, and indeed the furlough scheme, where it happened to work quite well for us as ATC. So we also have a number of younger employees who are on a level of salary that does fit comfortably within the furlough scheme. So, I think, to be honest, from a corporation perspective, the way that the government's various support packages worked, I think we could say that it worked for us fairly well. Of course, I have a very, very different opinion about the support packages for the general creative arts, because, of course, as we all know, it's been well documented, there were huge gaping holes in that. Very difficult for everyone involved. I mean, let's face it, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, broadly speaking, has been his approaches generally, I think, have been fairly broadly welcomed. Very difficult in the creative arts. You've got a huge number of people that pay themselves by a dividend rather than PAYE. Of course, they're company directors. I'm sure we've all done that in the past, those of us on this call. The government have issues with the way that those kind of dividends are accounted to, because there's no way of the HMRC differentiating between dividends paid through as a shareholder in a business, if you've got shares in a GlaxoSmithKline, Wellcome, whatever they're called, or if you're a tiny individual operator and you just pay yourselves as a dividend. So really difficult challenges like that. You know, to what extent the government continue funding things through the end of this year? I mean, they keep printing money, don't they? At some point, it's going to have to get squeezed. So all I know is I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old son upstairs on their iPads, probably playing Fortnite and Roblox, and it's them that's going to be paying for all of this for their, you know, for the rest of their lives, isn't it? So I don't know. The reverberations of this in the years and decades to come is going to be a bit of a nightmare, I think. But there's nothing that more. I don't think there's much more, frankly, that can be done. It's one of those impossible situations.
Going to come to Moose next to get the US perspective here, because I mean, I think, you know, as I say, there have been all sorts of issues with the way the UK government has supported businesses in general, and specifically the creative arts. There have been some fantastic schemes, but then there have been these phenomenal gaps that nobody seems to be interested in closing. That said, I mean, up until relatively recently, it felt like we were getting a lot more support when we looked at what was happening with the US industry, although there was a significant achievement on that point at the end of last year, which I know you were very involved in. So maybe you could talk us through, you know, what it's been like for the last 9 months and what that big achievement late last year should mean for the live community in the US in the months ahead.
Yeah. You know, you listening to you guys talk about when your funding's going to run out, or how long it's going to last. And you know, the Save Our Stages Act, which is now officially the Shuttered Venue Operators grant, applications haven't even opened for it yet. And Chris, just to correct you, it's now what, 10 months since venues have been closed, 10.5 months. So, you know, you can do some math there and figure, even if they were to open up the applications and by the time things get processed, we're looking at a year without a single dollar having come through many of these businesses. In fact, we're looking at most of these businesses, the venues and the promoters that have had to do refunds have paid significantly as shows have been canceled out. And that's, you know, negative revenue. In addition to many of the independent operators that have been able to do so have continued to keep their staff on board. Some of the government programs were specifically geared towards that, but it's not like there's work to be done. Like Rick said, you know, like a lot of the anything involving a live show, you know, if you're not open in any capacity, what are you going to have them do? There's only so many property improvements that can be done within the time frame. So, you know, with this $15 billion program, and it includes a significant number of different businesses. It includes independent venues, comedy clubs, music clubs, amphitheaters, you know, Broadway, booking agents, managers, museums, et cetera. Like it's essentially shuttered businesses that have not been able to operate. It doesn't include staff, and those, you know, we're also, I should say, not those specifically, but unemployment in particular has been a major issue in the States. The previous administration did not necessarily consider it as big of a priority as the current administration is, or I should clarify, they positioned it differently, would probably be the appropriate way to say it. And we're dealing with repercussions across the board. So the states didn't have the ability to look at the arts and culture sector as an economic contributor prior to the passage of Save Our Stages Act, or they say it hadn't traditionally done that. All of us know it. Any conversation you've had about, you know, the music industry in the States versus what the programs are available to the Brits or pretty much any other developed country is that we just don't have those facilities in place, or the ones we have currently are not as capable or equipped. And so I'd like to see this change. You know, I think that part of what NIVA was able to do was show the economic impact of the performing arts sector and the many different jobs and community and, you know, people that are involved and how it affects local economies and as an employment base and a generator for neighboring businesses and everything else, because that really was the crux of our argument. And this is the first time that it's had to be said like that to the states, to the federal government, because the U.S., as everybody knows, it's kind of like the survival of the fittest, right? And that's the way we operate. And here was a potential extinction level event. So we needed government intervention to be able to stop an entire sector from disappearing. I feel strongly that the non venues of that we all still depend upon, the artists, the contractors, the vendors, the staff, the tertiary companies that have been out of business as well and don't have any income for the near future. They have to be addressed. There have to be government programs that allow the people that depend upon the businesses that we have been able to get funding for, and that they can help them through them. I mean, like a company like Adams, 98%. No business is expected to exist on a 98% loss. And even the way that the shuttered venue operators grants are being rolled out, it's rolled out in tiers. So if you are down 90% revenue versus last year, you have access to it first. If you're down 70% revenue, you have access to it second, and then it opens up broader than that. And that's to basically make sure that those that are hit the hardest are able to access the funds that have been allocated. But in that program, there's also an automatic renewal. So should this continue, keep in mind, the applications haven't even opened yet. But should this continue, there is the ability to reapply for an ongoing amount for the businesses that have already received this program.
Let's come to Adam next. I mean, I think as someone who's been reporting on this a lot over the last 12 months and looking at where there have been good schemes here in the UK or elsewhere, where there's been cultural specific schemes, looking at the gaps. But I suppose, coming out as a music business journalist, we tend to talk about the venues and the festivals and the artists and the songwriters themselves because they're the most obvious and we can see how they're being affected. But what about the logistics side of the business, the equipment side of the business, the production side of the business? I mean, are we going to, when we return, have lost a lot of infrastructure and expertise because there were gaps in support and people have just had to leave the business and go and do something else?
No, I don't think that will happen. I think, as I mentioned previously, that the limiting factor is the aircraft that are on the routes, not very many at the moment, and all of them narrow-bodied. That will come back with tourism, because the majority of freight that travels by air, including ours, travels on passenger aircraft. When you go on holiday to Disney World, there's 7 pallets of Coldplay underneath your feet. So that will recover. That my main concern, really, and we'll probably touch on that later, I imagine, is the amount of techs that I talk to who are driving for Oak Furniture Land or Amazon or similar. And one particular friend of mine retraining as a gas fitter. And although he loves the industry, he's been in the industry 25 years, he's also come around to the idea of seeing his daughter at night and reading her a story. And although he isn't earning so much as he was, he's also having a lot of quality time with his family. And so that is the main concern for me. I mean, this industry is run by 2 nations, really. It's us and the Americans. This really is a huge industry for us. And it does worry me that it will wilt in this country because of the lack of support. Not just in the coronavirus, the Brexit, the visas, the fact that we're going to have to apply for visas to work in the EU countries at the moment. It's just, we've not been considered, on any level.
It's really true. It's a perfect storm, isn't it? It really is a disaster from that perspective. The combination of Brexit and the pandemic. You're right. By the way, I think you should suggest to Coldplay that their best of album is called 7 Pallets of Coldplay. I think that's a perfect. Like that a lot. Next time we get on a plane, I'll think about the fact there are 7 pallets of Coldplay underneath it.
Underneath it on every flight, everywhere, at all times.
But I suppose that's the important point, I think. Okay, the logistical infrastructure may still be there, but it is that talent, and particularly the freelance talent that and I mean, I know, talking to people on the festival side of the business, how they will say, there are freelancers that we hire every year on our festival. We don't really know what they do. We just know that without them, the festival wouldn't happen. And if those people have had to go off and get new careers, or indeed, they found that they're happy in a new career, I think that's going to be a big challenge for the business. Moving on. Oh, go on.
Just on that, Chris. I mean, so I was looking at the stats last year, actually, and And aside from those transient workers that come in and out of festival sites and things like that, and they could be working for half the year, but if you look at people that are working full time, what's described as full time in the music industry, so there are 190,000 people in the UK that work in the music industry, of which 72% are self-employed, or at least sole traders of some sort, as in not on a PAYE salary. So it's nearly 150,000 people are affected by this, and it's, I suppose if you were to compare that number to the grocery industry, I think there are 3 million people that work in the grocery industry in the UK. Fine, it's a small subset, but it's, as Adam says, it's a crucially important industry. It's the lifeblood. It sells, film and music sell the UK globally. I mean, I suppose Scottish whiskey is sold globally and certain cheeses are sold globally, but it is a fundamental industry. And Adam's absolutely right. We do need a different level of support, unfortunately, because we are uniquely hit by the inability to tour, the inability to open venues, and the inability to travel, and the inability to be able to move stuff around freely.
Mike, to get his perspective. I mean, again, in terms of when things start to return, whenever that is, would you echo the things we've already talked about in terms of the challenges we're going to face in terms of maybe we've lost that talent, how do we get it back? Or are there any other challenges that you can foresee that as an agent and the artist you're working for, even once we can get back to full capacity shows, there's still going to be work to be done and challenges to be met?
Well, the first thing is, what everyone said, I concur with perfectly. I mean, the challenges that we're going to have with people behind the scenes not being available to help facilitate these great shows and great events that we run is heartbreaking, and it's going to take a while to come back. The big challenge from an artist perspective, and let's sort of move on to a slightly different area, is that the bigger the artist, the more costs they have before they go on the road, and they will be unable to get COVID-19 insurance. So if you're Coldplay by any other name and you've got a global tour, you may have to look at putting £4 to £5 million worth of costs in play in advanced production spend before your tour goes out. Now, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any way of getting insurance for that. That's a big risk if all of a sudden Germany decides that you as Coldplay are not allowed in because they've changed their regulations. And that is going to be one of the biggest challenges that our industry faces when it gets back on the road, and whether said artist wants to take that responsibility, whether there are government-backed schemes to help underwrite it, whether the big insurance companies will take that risk. But obviously they're going to want a huge premium to do that. And none of us have an answer to it right now. We're lobbying government to try to get them to at least underwrite events and venues to start with, but clearly a government would underwrite the Reading Festival because it's a British event. Are they going to underwrite a Coldplay tour that's global? And who makes that decision, and who takes that risk of not being able to insure a huge expense? I mean, none of us move into a house and don't insure it. None of us have a big expense of a car and don't insure it. So that's a huge challenge, and something that behind the scenes we're all wrestling with and trying to find a solution, whatever that may be. And there's various different discussions being had, but there's no real clear path forward as yet.
Going to come to Betsy to get sort of your perspective on, when things start to resume, whether that's with smaller shows in the autumn, bigger shows next year, or whenever. I mean, as a venue, beyond having potentially lost this network of talented freelancers, are there any other issues that you can foresee that you're going to have to meet, challenges you're going to have to meet once things start to resume?
I think the biggest challenge is actually getting audiences into the venue, because I think people are going to, although everyone wants to get back to normality, I think people are still going to be scared about going into a crowd, and there's going to be a lot of a taboo. So people are going to be scared about posting pictures of being in a crowd, because their friends are going to be like, "Oh, what are you doing? Are you okay doing that?" So I think that's a major thing. I think the main thing, is the tech side. I'm scared that we're going to lose all of our technicians and our backhand people, and yeah, it's all a bit up in the air at the moment.
It's interesting, linked to what you've just said there. One thing that came up on our Tuesday panel was, you know, is that generation who are at the age, whatever the age is, where they're just experiencing, you know, gigs on their own for the first time, and it's becoming part of their life. And then, you know, a big portion of those people then become regular gig goers for a number of years. And we've got an 18-month gap of that. And it's sort of like, you know, have we lost that generation, or can we get them back in? So yes, I think there's definitely an audience element here.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things I'd like to raise just quickly is that one of the things, you know, there's a number of tours that we have rescheduled, and a number of tours, you know, that continue to move. And some of the tours that are rescheduled, even with shows taking place currently, still announced for March, we're seeing people buying tickets. And we're seeing that there is a real sense that people want to go to events. So while I agree with Betsy, there might be some reticence, I don't think it's going to last very long. I think that people feel that it's their right and their, you know, that to live your life and to go out and enjoy it. And once a good proportion of the population is vaccinated, and, you know, it becomes endemic, not pandemic, people will end up wanting to go out and they'll want to be celebrating. And you know, a phrase that I've heard a lot of recently is people are talking about the cultural industries being hit with the sort of the roaring 20s again, you know, with people desperate to go out and enjoy things. And while I don't necessarily agree it's going to be that, you know, that big, I do think that people are going to want to live their lives and take their own responsibility and just go out and enjoy. So I don't see too much reticence.
Wasn't there a sold-out show this weekend in New Zealand? 20,000 people turned up, no face masks because they've locked down and they've done it efficiently, and every single ticket sold. And I think that proves how keen people are to get back. I'm not concerned about it from a desire point of view. The industry, no one can wait for this to happen. It's such a visceral experience, so part of the human experience to be together, you know, with a common accord. So that's not the problem we're facing. I think you're right. It's just, you know, can we do it? When can we do it?
Will be interesting to see. I mean, yeah, the Live Nation stats that they've been publishing echo what Mike's been saying, that most people are holding on to their tickets, even if that ticket has been budged 6 times by now. The amount of people asking for refunds is relatively low, but I mean, it's I suppose the most frustrating thing of all of this has been, it's the uncertainty, isn't it? I mean, it makes running a panel on this really hard, because it is, you know, it's kind of 6 of us trying to find different ways of saying we don't really know, and in some ways that's been the most frustrating thing, the fact that there are so many questions to be answered and uncertainty. But Mike brought a little bit of optimism into the conversation, so let's maybe see if we can spend the last 20 minutes looking for some positives which are possibly there. And I mean, I guess that leads us to, let's talk about the live streaming adventure that you've been on, Rick, with the Drift business. Obviously, quite quickly, once shutdown began last March, we saw lots of artists popping up on Instagram Live and on Twitch and on Facebook doing live streaming, more just to, you know, be able to have a way of connecting with their fans, to perform, to be creative. But I know that what you saw there was, well, that's great in terms of having a place to get music to fans, but can we commercialize this? And I think that's kind of where the Drift business came from. So maybe just talk us through how that business came about, and, you know, what you've learned in the 6 months plus that you've been running it.
Yeah, thanks. So I am gonna try and spin this positively, because there is positivity to come from it. But I'm even going to try and do it. And Adam, I'm even going to try and join the dots between how positive live streaming can be and with your business of global freight, because I actually genuinely think the strands can get out there. But yeah, let me just start again by reiterating, because it's important for the record, that you know, look, at the end of the day, I'm a music fan. It's all I've ever done, and I cannot wait to get out there. And as Adam said, get out there and be in that collective experience with like-minded people, and getting beer spilt all over my shoes and having a whale of a time. And so, you know, it's crucial to note, and, you know, I'll reference Mike in a little bit. It's crucial to note that most of us that are in this part of the industry now have all come to the realization that live streaming is, of course, a totally different model to live concerts. it's something that doesn't cannibalize any other area of the industry. And in our opinion, and we've kind of got data now to support it as we do more and more shows, genuinely feel that it can amplify an artist's reach, and therefore, and we have absolute data to support that it amplifies artist album campaigns. And we're seeing, even looking at Bicep, for example, the dance act, they're #1 in the midweeks this week in the UK, did a really successful live stream a couple of months ago, and you can see the thread of how that kind of fed into the campaign. Similarly, Dua Lipa, having a very successful live stream at the end of last year. And Adam, I'm going to start to join the dot to you. I was speaking to her agent the other day at WME, and on the back of the live stream, her tour had sold fairly well up until that point, but it had only sold, I won't put a percentage on it because I don't know the exact, but it hadn't sold out. They sold tens of thousands of tickets on the back of the live stream show for the tour, for the actual tour. So we're seeing this all the time, and I think that's where the positivity lies, because out of this darkness, nobody in your right mind would have suggested doing a live stream show a year ago. Everyone would have thought you were bonkers, and it had connotations of it was cheap, and it never shot well, and it wasn't creative. It was just a band in a venue with some crap cameras, and it always looked shit, because of course live streaming's been around for about 10 years. But as the technology's evolved, and as we've all got, look at us lot, we've had a year of Zooms. Most people weren't using Zoom 18 months ago. Funny enough, we were kind of early adopters on Zoom because we happened to really get into it a couple of years ago. But, we've all, everything to do with living within a virtual world has become second nature to us, because ultimately the technology has accelerated quick enough to support those processes. So, we launched it, to answer your question quickly, Chris. We launched it right at the beginning. We didn't really set out to set up a business. In fact, we definitely didn't set out to set it up as a business. We just were looking at all of these artists doing live streams from, with an iPhone in their front room in the first lockdown. And with all respect to those artists, because artists need to communicate, they need to perform, they need to get, their art out there. But it wasn't fit for purpose. It's limited production-wise. It's limited creatively. It's limited artistically. And so we thought to ourselves, Brian and I, my business partner, if we were to do a live stream, how would we do it? And how could we shoot it beautifully? Where would we shoot it? How would we get tickets to people? So on and so forth. And very quickly, the idea came about around Laura Marling, who we manage, who had just cancelled her global acoustic tour, solo acoustic. 50 dates around the world, sold out. So 60 or 70,000 ticket purchases, disappointed. So we thought, well, let's put her and do an acoustic show in the Union Chapel. And that was the beginning, the genesis of the idea. And we thought, well, let's shoot it with 4 or 5 cameras. Let's do it properly. Let's get a beautiful director involved, and so on and so forth. And it ended up being a great success on every level, really. And then we quickly followed that up with Nick Cave from Alexander Palace, again, who we manage. And again, it was an enormous success, generated significant revenues, and was creatively and artistically, incredibly warmly received as well. So it was through doing those first 2 shows with our clients that we realized, and during doing them, Jesus, this is more exciting than just doing a couple of live streams. This is a whole new sector. This is a whole new model, a whole new format. It genuinely felt like that. We can't lay claim to having invented live streaming, but certainly I believe that we were the very first people to ever do a ticketed global live stream event with no audience. It's an odd concept, but it really, really works. And out of it has grown this amazingly creative format that, frankly speaking, I think we're all pretty confident it's here to stay. It'll be part of our lives when we think about what we do as an artist representative, whether an agent or manager. We will always want to film and capture an artist in a beautiful venue like Bush Hall. We'll always want to amplify an album campaign, much more engaging than just doing a music video. And you can actually make significant money out of doing a live stream, where, of course, you don't make any money out of putting a music video on YouTube, with respect to YouTube. And similarly, amplifying the on sale of a tour. Mike and I have talked about this. Where would you slot a live stream? Would you do it on the announce of a tour 8 months out, 9 months out, or would you do it at the end or the beginning of a tour for all those people that couldn't buy tickets because the show was sold out? And then the last thing, just to plant the seed in everybody's head, and then I'll shut up. Apart from it being an incredibly creative format and obviously a new revenue stream that never existed before and one that doesn't cannibalize other revenue streams, almost the most exciting thing is the fact that it provides us with the opportunity to communicate live music to music fans in every single corner of the world. And of course, even when an artist plays an extensive global tour with Adam's support, you're only touching on a small subset of fans because you're only going through 50, 80, 100 cities. Well, there are hundreds of thousands, millions of music fans that couldn't get to the venue because they don't live in that city or don't have the money to get to that city or couldn't buy a ticket because it was sold out or couldn't buy a ticket, it was too expensive, whatever it may have been. And so, we've sold tickets in 171 countries across the shows that we've done over the last 6 months, which is an astonishing figure. And some of the bigger shows we've done, like Niall Horan from the Royal Albert Hall, we sold tickets for that one show in 157 countries. And Andrea Bocelli from Italy, just before Christmas, 131 countries. So you're reaching incredibly wide around the world, and so for that reason alone, it's really exciting. So sorry to ramble through. There was a lot there, but.
No, well, it's good to go. I mean, let's get Mike's perspective. I mean, I think, Rick, you would agree that you feel, because some people thought, is this just a stopgap measure during shutdown? But you're very much passionate that actually, no, this is going to be a positive of COVID, that we've got this brand new revenue stream that's going to be part of an artist's business long term. And I'm just interested to see, where Mike possibly sees live streaming fitting in. The other thing that interests me as a music business sort of journalist is that live streaming is something that actually brings all the different strands of the music industry together, because it's kind of content, it's got songs in there, it is direct to fan, there might be some merchandise sales, but it's also a live performance. So where do you see, if live streaming does become a part of the business long term, what will the agent's role be in making all of that happen?
Well, I mean, look, Rick touched on it before. I mean, there's various different. A live stream has to be an event. It can't just be an add-on, a throwaway. To Rick's point, the successful live streams have been ones that are events that are produced really well, that actually people feel they're getting something special for the purchase of the ticket. Now, I think there are a number of ways that streaming, we can build it into our live strategy for an artist, whether it be, as Rick said, album launch, tour launch, or a wrap up of a tour. My personal opinion is that I love the idea of a global artist doing a 100-day tour and played to 500, 600, however many hundreds of thousands of people, and finishing up on their last date by adding an additional show that is a live stream that brings the whole community back together that would have seen said artist 18 months previously. I love the idea of that, and I think on a larger scale, I think that's really good. On a smaller scale, because we represent a lot of developing acts, it's a great way to get them to a bigger community. So I think live streaming, and maybe this is a little bit sacrosanct, but live streaming ticketed is definitely here to stay and something that we're going to protect vociferously. But there are also opportunities to do live streaming brands that can get said artist's new material to a very broad audience. So that's something that we will start figuring in, and potentially talking to global brands about how their loyalty programs and their customer programs can get our clients to a broader audience. Because ultimately, musicians, we want them to be creative, and they want to get their creativity to as many people as they possibly can. So we've got to look at all the different ways of viewing the live stream, but quality is everything. If you're going to do a live stream and you think you want to do it in your bedroom, then you can't charge people for it. And go to the Albert Hall, go to the Bush Hall, go to a forest somewhere, create an event, and then you've got a narrative to talk to your fan base about, and to the sort of passive fan that might just not know enough about you but is intrigued by what you're trying to do.
I can't help but think that this entire conversation has basically been what probably was being talked about 35 years ago, as MTV said, you could put video to these songs you hear on the radio. And it just seems like I mean, look, nobody knows what's coming, right? We know it's here, but we don't know what's coming. And that's really where a lot of the creative aspect comes from. It is being able to take something that it's going to shift. It's going to shift before the summer comes. We're going to see new people innovating. We're going to see new people putting pay models out there. We're going to see artists putting things together that we would never expect. Every single time somebody puts a live performance in a virtual world or a gaming community, I mean, like, there's a reason that people are trying to think of something that speaks to them. We're always going to see that. It's just, it's going to be on your phone or your computer instead of your television because you're flipping through 13 channels or something like that.
I do think the important thing is the call to action. Sorry to interrupt, but the big thing about the live stream is it's a call to action for a group of people at the same time. And I think there's something about that community that's really important. And the reason why the MTV, example, which is a really good example, isn't overly relevant to this is that, you watch it as your, at your own, in your own timing, or it's part of the programming of your TV channel. But the live stream, if you can congregate a group of fans at a set time, it becomes an event. And I think that's an important factor psychologically for people. So Dua Lipa was a great example. It was a very successful stream, but it felt like, even though it wasn't live, it felt like it was a live event that everyone was watching together. And that togetherness, especially in the current climate, is something that people want to share, which is why the idea of doing an end of tour live stream that isn't rebroadcast, so it's only available and you have to watch it then, becomes a really interesting thing for people to watch at the same time and then talk about.
I was just going to say, we are coming towards the end of the panel. So if anyone tuning in, some people already have been typing in some comments. If you have any questions, you can type whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. They all come to me here. So I want to ask Moose one more question, and then maybe I'll ask a couple of those questions. Talking of coming together, I mean, if we're looking for positives that might strengthen the industry long term, I mean, one thing we talked about on Tuesday with our panel, but from a UK perspective, was that the live industry has come together in a much more proactive way over the last year here in the UK. And there were already organisations like Music Venue Trust, like Independent Venue Week, that had built the networks to help make that happen. But that perhaps the live side of the industry has not generally been as organised as, say, the recorded side of the industry. And one of the upsides is we have seen these networks being built both formally and informally, which hopefully will strengthen the industry long term. And I'm just interested to get your US perspective on that. I mean, obviously, you've been actively involved in that in terms of bringing the independent venue community closer together. I mean, have you seen a more willingness to collaborate across the community? And do you think that that can be used to strengthen the business post the pandemic?
I mean, yes, Chris, like, and the reason I'm kind of flustered to answer this is because it has been nothing but the community that has moved this forward, right? Like, I mean, it has been people that would otherwise consider themselves competitors working together hand in hand. These are business leaders. These are people who would rightfully have their own panel at any trade conference that are working together as if they're colleagues in the pit, just trying to kind of figure out Excel sheets and, protocol and stuff like that. So I feel like there's been an equalization of peers in a sense that we've never experienced in this sector before. You have people that are communicating at speeds that would not have existed had they also had their businesses to run. Which is, kind of a nice perk to a really terrible situation. I also think, and I know this was something was talked about earlier, we've lost a lot of employees to people moving, going back home to live with their parents, leaving city centers, etc. And I think that one of the benefits that will come from that is, as someone applies for a job where they live now, you'll be able to see where they previously worked. And instead of saying, oh, that's cool, they used to work at this venue whose name I know, you can actually reach out to the person and say, hey, this person applied for a job. What's their story? And get and have an answer that somebody you respect is going to give you an answer to. And certainly the future of NIVA. I mean, NIVA didn't exist a year ago. And now we have over 3,000 independent venues and promoters from literally every single state and DC and Guam, as part of the membership. So when you have an organization like that and you can think towards the future as far as what the value is, I think from a venue's perspective, as a member of the organization, it would have to be the ability to help with the business and build the community. And of course, the one that has been the most vital over the last year is just be able to advocate on behalf of this business sector, which has not had an advocate in the past. And that's, you can see that in the legislation that has affected the live sector in the past. And when it does come up state or national, that the independents just haven't been part of that dialogue before, but we are now. And I think that only good things are going to be able to come from that.
Yeah, so I guess it's keeping that momentum going once things return to normal and everyone gets super busy again. I have just got a few questions that have come in, so we're going to try and do those before we wrap up. Actually, first of all, we'll come back to you, Moose. Where somebody has asked if you could just clarify, you talked about there being tiers in the rollout of the funding program in the US, and someone just asked for a little bit of clarity on how that's working.
Yeah, the way the program is set up, and if you go to NIVA's website, nivasos.org, NIVASSOC.org, we do have a page right there that's much more informative than what I'm about to tell you. But essentially, there are priority periods for the funds to be doled out. So those businesses that have lost more than 90% have the ability to access the first period, and then those that have lost more than 70% will access the second period. And then everyone else has access after that. And the reason that is the case is because there is only $15 billion. And there are a significant number of businesses that this grant is going to apply for. The U.S. does not have a history of grants for in this nature, right? This is rolled out by the Small Business Administration, which is generally a loan program. They're the ones that roll out the programs when there's disasters or something like that. Like, this is a business thing, and grants come from different government sectors in the States. So this is a new path forward for them overall. And the hope is that should the funds deplete, which is pretty much a certainty, that at least the people that need it the most, were able to get to it. And then we can continue to fight on behalf of everyone else who still needs access to it, that we can get that replenished.
Okay, I'm going to come to Mike next. I mean, one person said, you mentioned getting brands involved in live streaming, and obviously at CAA you have a very active, brand partnership side to the business. And someone's saying, I mean, given that a lot of these live stream shows that we've seen, the ticketed shows, the starting point is the existing direct-to-fan relationship and sort of pushing it out to existing fan base. So what do you see? Are the brands mainly bringing money to the table, or can they amplify the reach of the show? What do you see as their specific roles?
Well, I think they've got a number of roles, but clearly, an association with a brand should come with some reward for the performer. That's clear, in my opinion. Secondly, the brands have big reach. I mean, you look at loyalty programs for various different, airlines, for want of a better example, or even grocers. They've got huge reaches, and maybe it's not that targeted. But it's a good way to connect with people. I mean, I wasn't involved in the McDonald's live stream, so I'm not that well versed at talking to it. But as far as I was aware, a number of artists played to very big audiences there. Was it a brilliant experience from a production point of view? I don't want to comment on that. But it's an opportunity for a musician, an artist, and all of their crew to work, which is important. And there's a connection to people that maybe haven't discovered that artist. Virgin Money Virgin Money were instrumental in helping to fund the Unity Arena shows, the outdoor shows in Newcastle this summer. I mean, that was a great use of a brand helping a promoter create opportunities for live events. And that's, we should be thanking Virgin Money for doing that. And also for, I think they had a program of developing 4 new artists, which they gave them some funding to help them through the pandemic. Brands brands should be thinking like that.
Okay. One last question and then we'll wrap up. I mean, one person has said, with many, particularly of the bigger name artists, now postponing their autumn dates 2021 into 2022 for all the reasons we discussed earlier. Certainly any artists who have a global side to their touring business probably doing that. If it turns out that within the UK, as the vaccine rolls out over the summer, we can start to have something nearing full capacity shows in the autumn, but quite a lot of the bigger acts, for the reasons we've discussed, also the insurance reasons we've discussed, have pushed back in 2022. Will there be a flurry of opportunities in the autumn, perhaps for UK artists, to be filling gaps in venues which it turns out can reopen when the bigger shows are postponed? So I mean, maybe I'll ask Betsy that question first, in terms of, do you have a full program for the autumn, or do you foresee there being some quite last minute bookings if, touch wood, you can actually start doing something near full capacity shows from September, October onwards?
Absolutely. We want to fill up our diary as much as possible. We've definitely got gaps. We're not filling up our diary in the autumn at the moment because there's still complete uncertainty, like we've all been discussing. So yeah, if we're able to, then absolutely, we want to get as many UK artists in as possible and support the UK industry. Like, that's exactly what we want to be doing and pushing for.
I'll ask basically, maybe just get quickly Mike and Rick to come in on that as well. I mean, do you foresee that there, for a certain level of artists within the UK, it might turn out that there are some opportunities there, given, as I say, the bigger acts, the international acts, are increasingly pushing back into 2022?
From our perspective, certainly we're going to push to get artists out as quickly as we can. I mean, Laura Marling, for example, is ready to pick up a guitar and get on the road as soon as a venue opens. So and the same with all of our artists, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think the UK itself, whilst there are complexities that are going to be long lasting when it comes to international, as we discussed earlier, I think there is an opportunity to kickstart, and I can't remember if it was Moose or Adam or Mike or Betsy that said it earlier, but there's every chance that life could snap back to some sort of normality a little more quickly once the vaccination program is rolled out successfully in the UK. I think those challenges are going to be vastly more complicated across Europe and the world. But if the borders are still pretty closed, and if we have got to a point where we've vaccinated 70% of the country by summer, then you've got to think it could snap back pretty quickly. And in that event, then it could be an amazing end of summer and have an incredible late summer of party time, because we'll all be desperate for a few beers by then, I tell you.
Yeah, I think the one thing, look, setting up concerts and putting artists on tour, you need the backup staff. You need it's slightly more complex than just going, oh, there's a space in a venue, fill it. But I think clearly, where there's a will, there's a way, and ultimately British artists based in England who want to work, if there are venues open and we think that there's demand to see them, then we should be ready to pivot. And certainly we've made sure, or we're in discussions with a number of our clients to say, if your international tour falls over, then potentially let's pivot and try to add some more UK shows, should the UK be the market that's open for business.
Yeah. So I suppose that's having empty slots in venues we need to fill in October and November is a problem we would all love to have to solve, I guess. Yeah. if that is the eventuality. Anyway, our time is up, unfortunately. Such an interesting conversation, so many insights and on the challenges ahead, and clearly there are lots of challenges ahead, but hopefully a little bit of optimism and positivity in there. Maybe less so in what's going to be happening in the next few months, but over the next year, and then once things start to resume in 2022, we hope. So thank you for tuning in to this panel, and if you tuned into any of the other panels we presented this week, thanks again. All three of our panels will be available on demand on the CMU YouTube channel. If you sign up to the CMU Daily, we'll tell you all about that tomorrow, and they'll be available, well, over the final weekend of Independent Venue Week, and indeed they'll be on there for the months ahead as well. This is the final CMU panel as part of Independent Venue Week, but there's lots of other great stuff happening, other discussions, conversations, and lots of live streaming shows for you to tune into. So make sure you go back to the website to check out all of that. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Betsy, to Adam, to Rick, to Mike, and to Moose for joining us and giving us all of those insights. And let me do my final plugs, because I've not done any plugging on any of the panels we've done this week. So if you're not a CMU subscriber, if you go to cmusignup.com, I think that's quite easy to remember. You can find out how to access our daily bulletin, our podcast, and all of the other things that we offer to help you navigate and understand the music business. But there you go. That's it. Thanks again to my panel. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Goodbye, everybody.